So what do you think is behind that? Why are girls traveling so much by themselves?
They're sick of men.
Yeah, I guess so, right?
That's pretty much what it is.
What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the GlobeFocus podcast. I am your host, Andrew James, and this week I have the privilege of interviewing my good friend, Corie Fay. Corie lives a really interesting combination life. Half the time she works as a high-end financial consultant, and the rest of the time she's a travel content creator. If this is your first time listening to the GlobeFocus podcast, be sure to follow and rate. Any support is highly appreciated. And without further ado, let's jump into this week's discussion. Look at us. We're doing a podcast.
Wow, this is so cute.
We are currently here in Miami, Florida. I am with my good friend Corie Fay. She is a corporate office, but also travel extraordinaire.
Yeah.
That's not a good description. I should have thought of it. We have such an, the way we even met was strange. So it's hard to even
weird.
Can you describe yourself to the audience for people listening?
Hi, my name is Corie Fay. I work full-time in corporate America. I have for the past 6-7 years, but on the side, I'm also a travel content creator.
Yeah.
How's that?
Nice.
Good.
I mean, that was amazing.
My elevator pitch.
We met a couple years ago in New York.
Yes.
And we've been kind of just friends online. The interesting thing about our lives is basically we meet people and then you only hang out for a week, but you stay in touch online. Mm-hmm. And then so you really do feel like you're getting to know them better. And we've known each other for a while, but we've only hung out 3 times.
That week, though, that you spend together, I think builds the foundation for the rest of your relationship.
Exactly. And then you can just maintain it on the social media app.
When you spend 24/7 with someone and then still decide you like them after a week, it's real.
Yeah. Well, if you can travel with someone, it's a good test. But most people I've been able to travel with, there's only a couple people I can think of who I have not enjoyed traveling with.
Yeah, but you also intentionally seek
And then it's hell. If you don't like the person you're with and you're stuck on a trip with them for extended, run if you can't. But I'll always tough it out. I just don't want to offend anyone. But I'm getting better about that.
Yeah, it's good. Politeness.
Anyways, guys, so this is GlobeFocus episode 3. We're here to talk about a couple things. First off, we're going to talk about where you grew up, San Francisco, and your heritage. And then I'm going to get canceled so fast. I'm just treading into dangerous water on episode 3. And then we're going to talk about some travel hacks, the travel industry, because Corey's been in it for a long time, and we both just kind of talk about it a lot. We're just going to get super nerdy with it, and I think we should just talk about how we normally would, and then if people understand what we're saying, great, and if not, go follow some influencers.
If you feel like you get along with us, you could probably travel with us. I think that's the thing.
And eventually GlobeFocus will be doing trips.
Oh, okay.
So you guys can know that early, but
Are you hosting all of them?
No, but eventually GlobeFocus will certainly be a platform to travel. But anyways, let's talk about you, Corie Fay. Where did you grow up?
So I grew up in San Francisco, California, and I grew up in the 90s because I'm old.
She's not old.
Older. You guys can do the math. But I grew up in a San Francisco that is very different than the San Francisco as we know it today. I grew up when there was just really Apple and Google, not the rest of Silicon Valley. So I was very pre-tech boom. That being said, I also grew up in downtown San Francisco, which you'll meet a lot of city kids, but you're not really going to meet a lot of downtown city kids. And that has a huge impact on your childhood.
Yeah, I mean, the idea of actually growing up in a city is I romanticize it as a kid, the Home Alone kind of ideas, or just the idea of you see families in movies or TV shows and they're literally living in a city together. And it's a very different way of life. So what was that like for you?
So think about the normal things you do as a kid, like learn to ride your bike or hang out with your friends after school. I didn't learn how to ride a bike until I was 15.
Really?
The year before I got my driver's
Why?
license.
I guess because it's just dangerous to ride bikes in San Francisco?
It's dangerous, and 2, if you think about San Francisco, if you've ever been there, it's one of the hilliest cities in the entire
world.
world.
Yeah. You're not going to just push your kid down the street. I mean, you could literally die.
Yeah, exactly. But at the same time, I've never been overwhelmed by a subway system or anything like that. So
Right. You're used to everything. You learned street smarts earlier.
Yeah, exactly.
You knew how to navigate a city. I mean, I remember when I moved to New York, I grew up in Virginia, Suffolk, Virginia, moving to New York. I'd been into Washington, D.C. a couple times, but I was brand new. So there's a lot to learn for sure. And I guess you had a head start on that. Realistically, riding a bike isn't even that useful. So.
No. I mean, I don't know how often I ride a bike now. So.
Did you grow up in an apartment building?
Yeah, so it's a condo. So it's 2 floors. But it's downtown. If you look at a map of San Francisco, and especially during Christmas, there's buildings that light up around the edges of the financial district. That's where I grew up.
And is downtown, was it dangerous then like it is now? Were there homeless people even then?
Yes, absolutely.
Was there like a lot though?
Yeah, but I think when you're a kid, you have rose-colored glasses, right? Like
You don't see
they
it.
weren't homeless to me. They were just people who were sitting on the street. And I think something too, like the way that you would walk home after school, like with your friends or things like that, it was, or play on like a cul-de-sac together. Like the things that you would see on like a
Yeah,
quintessential.
how did you play with your friends?
I would have to take the subway to
By
their
yourself
house.
or with like your
So
when
once I
you're
got to
older?
6th grade, I was able to take the subway by myself.
Did you play like soccer or anything growing up?
Yeah.
And like, would you go into like the field in the middle of the city kind of vibes? Or
Yeah.
would you drive out?
No, we'd have to go to the field in the middle.
You know
of
what's
the city.
interesting? Is I feel like you don't even talk about San Francisco that much, and you're from San Francisco. Do you not feel any kind of like pride? I guess you could say. I need to turn the air off actually.
Okay, so 2 things about not bringing up San Francisco is one, not a lot of people get it. So unless you grew up in a city yourself, which not a lot of people have, it's really hard to relate to. And then 2, the San Francisco I grew up in isn't even the San Francisco that it is today. So it's even hard for me to talk about the city itself with people who live there currently because so much has changed.
How much? What exactly has changed? The tech?
Yeah, so there's obviously the tech boom, so a lot of people got priced out. And even like the Salesforce Tower, it's the tallest building in San Francisco. Like that's 6 blocks from my house. It wasn't there.
Yeah,
when I
so it
was
just
there.
looks different.
Yeah, and that, and also, I mean, especially during COVID, like downtown now is a ghost town. It's abandoned construction sites, like business buildings that are just totally empty. It's getting more lively now than it was before, but it's just, yeah, not the same city.
You know, I think San Francisco is honestly one of my favorite cities in the U.S. for sure. And I've only visited, obviously, mostly post-COVID. I really like how like the water meets city right there. The coast is beautiful. Obviously, the bridge is iconic. So I can't even imagine how much better it would have been.
Don't get me wrong, I've always felt tremendous pride from San Francisco. If you're from there, you know that your area code means a lot. I'm a 415 girl.
Is that what it is? 415?
Yeah, 415.
I'm 910.
There's a lot of area codes in San
Jacksonville, North
Francisco.
Carolina,
There's a lot of
shout
area
out.
codes in San Francisco, but 415 is like one of the OGs. There's a ton of things that we're very, very proud of. If anyone knows what like a fizz face is, that's like very OG San Francisco. And I grew up like a San Francisco sports fan, but it's just, I've lived on the East Coast for so long now that I feel like both coasts have taken part in my identity, like not just one.
But I think what's interesting is that when you live in Boston, how long have you lived in Boston?
After college, so 6-7 years.
Okay. Did you go to college in Boston?
I went to University of Connecticut. Go Huskies.
So kind of near there. Do you think that you maybe relate more to Boston and I feel it's more part of your character because that's the home that you chose? And San Francisco is just where you were born? Because I feel like you're very Boston to me. Like you support Boston sports teams, right?
So my dad grew up outside of Boston. And that's where it gets a little tricky. So my dad grew up outside of Boston, so I always grew up a Boston sports fan. For most of the teams, they're not in the same league. That being said, that pisses a lot of people off because both cities have traded off championships in a couple sports, like year after year. Either way, I've always felt a tie to Boston. But the thing about San Francisco was I had this moment where if I don't leave now, like I will never leave. And I'm sure a lot of people feel the same way about their hometown. You grow up somewhere, you know exactly what it's like. It's comfortable, it's nice. But if you don't leave when you're in your 20s or so, you may never leave. And I'm glad I did. I'm glad I'm doing something else now. And San Francisco's not going anywhere at the end of the day.
But is it wrong? Like, there's nothing wrong with staying where you grew up.
No,
if you
not
like
at
where
all.
you grew up,
No.
especially if it's a big city like
But if
San
you have
Francisco.
a pull to go do something at a certain age, like go do it when you don't have a family, when you don't have kids, when you don't have something that's really tying you down.
Well, I think that's true. I mean, even just because I was living in Virginia up until 4 months ago with my parents. And even though I don't spend that much time in Seattle, just the very fact that I have rent and I have a place and there's like responsibility there and there's like necessity, urgency to pay for things. You know what I'm saying? It makes me work harder. It gives me more of a drive. And it's a nice feeling of just security, like having gone out into the world to establish myself somewhere new. So I think there definitely is something to be said for moving away from your hometown at least at some point in your life. Unless you really love where you live. Like for some, maybe you're born in Hawaii and you're just like, this is...
I would maybe.
But that's the exception, right? Everyone else, I think, I'd at least encourage them to try to go somewhere else.
Yeah, and even to try it for 6 months. Like it doesn't have to be for 5, 6, 7 years. Like,
There's a great Theo Von quote. He talks about like he had a mentor in his life who said, you can always come back home.
Exactly.
Like if you go away from Louisiana, where he's from, or for me, Virginia, like things don't work out, you can always come back home. Not everyone has that, right? That is a privilege, but yeah, definitely give it a shot.
Yeah.
Get out there. So what about your heritage? Let's talk a little bit about being
heritage.
Asian American in
yes.
the world. What technically
Hot
Irish,
topic.
right?
Yes. So the big part of me, I mean, I consider myself to be half white. But the other half is I am ethnically Chinese, which is funny because in California, it's not uncommon to meet people who are half white, half Chinese, half some kind of Asian. In the rest of the U.S., it is more rare. I have gotten, you look full Chinese. I've gotten, you look Latina. I've gotten everything under the sun. I think a lot of millennials especially can relate to sort of being a third culture kid. If you have a parent, one parent or two parents who are immigrants, you kind of grow up in this biculture. Like you're not really fully American, but you're not really fully your parents' culture either. You exist somewhere in the middle. And it creates a very confusing sense of identity, especially when you're younger. And there is a spectrum of kids who, especially with their parents, really leaned into their parents' heritage, and then some kids who have either rejected it or their parents didn't want them to embrace it out of fear of racism. There's a lot to unpack there.
Yeah, there's a lot there for sure. And I've actually, I really empathize with people who are in these types of situations because I think back to a good friend I made in Korea, and he's Korean Canadian. Both his parents are fully Korean. He was born in Korea. All of his extended family is Korean and in Korea, but he grew up in Canada. So he speaks Korean, but he does sound Canadian. And Korean people do not accept him in Korea. Like, there was a bar, for instance, we tried to go to a bar, or it was a club, and there was weird vibes from the beginning. And I was like, something's going on here. And like the way that the people were stamping us in were giving us weird looks, but we were like, let's go for it. We go downstairs, and then there's a big sign that says like, only Koreans allowed. And we were like, oh, okay. But my friend, I was like, would they not even let you in? He's like, yeah, as soon as they heard me speak, because they wouldn't consider me Korean. And so I think I don't want to say he has this, I don't want to project that onto him, but I could see how it would be tough to have identity issues because of that.
I mean, the thing is like being here, I don't look fully white, so I get a lot of, hey, what are you? But it's the same thing when I go back to China or Taiwan. It's, hey, you look white, like, what are you? Or you don't look, it's a lot of, hey, you don't look Asian, like, what are you? So you exist somewhere in the middle. And when you constantly have people, especially at a young age, saying you're not really one, but you're not really the other, like, where do you exist?
Yeah, and I think at the end of the day, it's such a silly question. Like, I have to ask myself that too, because why does this even matter? Where are you from? Because that's like the thing that I remember when I was younger, like being like the annoying, maybe like I would always ask people, where are you from? Now I don't really do that. I wait to see if they volunteer, because it shouldn't really affect your perception of someone in the slightest where they're from. Like, maybe just talk to them like a normal person. And then if it comes up, great. But, or if they volunteer or whatever. But I don't know. I don't know why a lot of white people, I think it's a necessary question for them. It's like it's oftentimes a white person asking someone, oh, where are you from? How did you get here? And I think that's a little weird.
No, I get it. But as someone who gets that question a lot, it's really easy to see the intention behind it.
And it's usually good? Or?
Yeah, if it's an innocent intention, it's like, hey, I don't want to say like you look different, but you look a little different. Like, where are you from? Or where are your parents from? It definitely gets old, I will say that. And there have been times where it definitely has not had a good intention. But when you can tell the intention behind it,
it's just curiosity.
It makes answering so much easier.
Yeah, I think a lot of people just are curious.
Yeah.
Where are you from?
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think they not being accepted into different cultures, like that my friend wasn't Canadian enough for Canada, wasn't Korean enough for Korea, stuck in the middle. But at the same time, do you think you feel, I mean, there's a lot of mixed people now. Do you think when you meet another person who's mixed Asian, do you feel some sense of camaraderie or not really?
It's tough because a lot of us, even when we're mixed, like we grow up really different. Like
yeah, well, I mean, it could be like mixed could be a lot of things too.
Yeah, but
Asian,
like specifically someone who's white and Asian, right? I consider myself really lucky that my mom and dad put me in bilingual school. So I grew up in a school where we were half day English, half day Chinese. So I grew up speaking Chinese without an accent.
That's crazy.
That is a huge, huge privilege. But think of the 30 kids that I graduated that school with. Of all of us, almost all of us were either half Chinese or half some kind of Asian. And I think there were most of the other kids were full Chinese.
So do you really speak Chinese?
Yes.
What, Mandarin?
Yeah, Mandarin.
So you could just cruise over to China and communicate no problem.
But I mean, that was the thing. My whole mom's side of the family only really speaks Chinese. So if I don't...
Can you teach me something in Chinese?
I don't know. What do you want to learn?
I don't know. What's like, I know ni hao.
Yeah,
what could we follow up with ni hao? Goodbye. Hello.
Yeah, okay. Goodbye is 再见.
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 Zaijian.
That's amazing. Do you ever meet someone in the U.S. who speaks Chinese and just start talking with them, or is it just...
Yeah, actually, this is like such a weird niche story, but I actually have made a lot of connections with New York City Uber drivers.
Really?
That are Chinese. So if you look a lot of times at your Uber or Lyft driver, whatever phone that they have using for navigation, sometimes it'll be in their home language, whether it's Spanish, English, Chinese. So if it's Chinese, and and I'm feeling particularly chatty that day, I'll like start up a conversation, and the responses I get back are always like, wow, it's so nice to talk to someone in a language that I understand you in.
Yeah.
And then the questions follow like, oh, how did you learn Chinese? Why don't you have an accent? Like, where are you from? But that's been really nice to be able to converse with someone like in their home language and a language that they feel comfortable with.
You know what's interesting is I'm not bilingual in the slightest. I barely speak English.
Barely.
But I really think like I feel a sense of comfort speaking to someone who I know English is their first language.
Yes.
Because I do find that when I'm traveling in groups with other people who English is their second language, I actually tend to mirror people and how they're speaking. And so I actually start speaking like pretty, almost not broken English, but I definitely will like turn it down a notch. Not to say that my vocabulary is particularly strong anyways, but it's just like, and then when I meet someone who's from a country that originally speaks English, there's a slight sense of relief being able to speak like completely how I normally would. So that's like a small percentage of relating to if someone speaks Chinese and they're in the US and they're constantly speaking a broken English and then they get to go back to China. That must be nice.
Yeah, I mean, two things to say there. One, I think that's really empathetic of you, honestly.
Thank you.
I think that's a very Gen Z thing to do. I mean, we all kind of know, like, I don't want to say Karens, but the Karens that go abroad, they're like, you should speak English when you're in Italy. Like, of course, they're going to speak Italian. But I think especially as more and more people start traveling, you start getting more empathetic with people who don't have English as their first language, because English is a hard language to learn.
No matter what they tell you, because people will tell you it's not.
No, it's...
Don't get it wrong. And people don't realize, I had a couple friends who I met recently, and English was their second language, and they were German. And I remember them so sincerely asking me, do we have a German accent when we speak to you? And I was like, of course. Like, yes. From the first word you say, we can tell that you're not from our country. But I don't think people realize that, because that's the thing that people criticize in other countries a lot when someone is trying to learn their language. Mm-hmm. And if people who spoke English did the same thing, it would be like, whoa, how dare you? But when, other countries are like criticizing the way you pronounce it, they have very short like patience for for people trying to, some countries do, I don't know.
But no, and I think a good example of that too is like when I was in 8th grade, we did an exchange trip with a girls' school in Shanghai. We spent the entire time speaking in Chinese. We didn't even bother. The whole idea was I went there for 2 weeks. We would speak Chinese. I would immerse myself in their family. And then for 2 weeks, she would come to San Francisco. Mm. We spent the entire time speaking in Chinese because it was easier for both of us.
What is Shanghai like?
Oh, chaotic. I mean, granted, I don't know what post-pandemic Shanghai is like. This was probably 10 years ago, over 10 years ago that I've been back to mainland China. But it's kind of beautiful in its own way. Like, if you really want to immerse yourself in another culture and you're from the US, I think there's very few places you can go where you don't really have any of the comforts of home. And I think that a lot of the cities in Asia in general are really, really good for it.
Like, as far as comforts?
Yeah.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. Cities in Asia are like the closest to like cities in America, I think, in a weird way. They have the comforts. I think in general, U.S. cities are dirtier and whatnot, but I'm saying comforts and accommodations and everything like that. Yeah, Korea, Japan,
but I think
China.
Getting outside of the cities, like that's where the real beauty is. Like there are so many beautiful places in Asia that are a little hard to get to just because of the language barrier. But I think when people think Asia, they think Tokyo, they think Beijing, they think Thailand. Like it's outside of the main cities that there's real beauty. And I hope that people make more of an effort to go there.
Actually, it's interesting. A girl asked me yesterday, someone asked me yesterday, if I could travel anywhere in the world, where would it be? And immediately, without hesitation, I said China.
Really?
But the thing is, I want to do China when I'm older, and I want to do it like 6 months, 3 months, immerse myself in the country. Because I've actually been fascinated with China since I was a kid, because it's such a large population, and it's so not so closed up, but very in its own world. And what people in America don't realize, and what took me a long time to realize, is people in other countries think like the way America does, in the sense that they think they're the main character country. America very much thinks we're the main character country. That is a thought within the bubble of America. And every country is a bubble, and they also have this thought. So China is 1 billion people, 3 times the population of the US, and all of them don't really give a fuck about America. And so that's fascinating to me.
Actually,
okay, maybe they do care, but they're aware they care, but they think China is the most important thing, right?
It's not that they think that China's okay. I'm gonna get canceled for saying this,
No,
but
please.
it's not that China necessarily thinks that. Okay, I think China actually is a good example of thinking that they're better than America. But most countries are constantly watching, especially small countries, are watching larger countries like a hawk because everything they do affects them.
Yeah, but I still think like Korea, for instance, is I always say they think they're the main characters. Koreans think. Not this is generalizing, but like the Koreans, not all Koreans. I'm saying the Koreans who kept us out of that club that night. Those Koreans think that they're the main character. Culture, they have to.
Disagree.
Okay.
I think that there are places, Korea included, I know Tokyo is included, where foreigners are not allowed. Mm-hmm. And I don't think that that's necessarily a main character thing. I think it's one, a respect thing. Like a lot, especially in Tokyo, there's a lot of bars that only sit 5 people. They want those 5 seats to go to people who
Actually live there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they want to create this culture of having people come back, right? Mm-hmm. That's not happening with tourists. And typically, there are some really, really respectful tourists out there. But for a lot of them, and the ones who don't speak Korean, it's a headache to the staff because they don't really know what's going on. Usually, these people just come in, buy one drink, and leave. They want to foster a community that doesn't include tourists, and it's their prerogative to do that.
Yeah, but the problem is, I think the reason why it's difficult for us to swallow that pill is because Texas can't do that. If a group of Chinese tourists comes into their restaurant in Texas and the Texans are like, we want to keep this just for Texans, that's wrong, and we wouldn't allow that here. So it's like, I think we hold the U.S. sometimes to a standard that we don't hold to other countries, and I just want to know why.
You say that, but almost every restaurant, place of service that I've ever been to has a sign that says they can refuse customers. We reserve the right to refuse service to anyone.
Right. That's true.
And it doesn't get implemented often because
they could.
But the thing with the U.S. is like, U.S. is such a melting pot of cultures. Mm-hmm. Like you will get people from all over the world who come here. I actually think that the U.S. is one of the few places where you can move there and you can become American. You can move to Korea, but you're not going to become Korean.
Right.
But people can come here and become American. And I don't think there's any other country where you can really do that.
Yeah, not easily. But I think, yeah, so you're saying because we're such a melting pot, because that's the way it's set up, then tourists, you just have to approach it differently. Yeah, I don't know. I think there's somewhere in the middle, because the thing with Japan, it does make sense to me, especially because of how many tourists there are in Japan. I understand if you don't want a group of Americans in your restaurant every night, but I think there's ways to hide from tourists as well. Like, for instance, this Korean club that wouldn't let us in was on the main street of Busan, where all the tourist hotels were. So it's like, if you want to have this club, just put it, there's plenty of places I can think of in New York or in Miami, like where you can just hide it from the tourists. Just don't put it in Times Square. Get it off of 42nd Street.
But so you're saying that a business has to give up a prime location that's probably really easy for people to drive to and get to just because they don't want tourists?
I'm saying it would make it easier. Like in downtown Austin, if there was a restaurant that said, we aren't going to let Chinese tourists into our restaurant, that is going to be a tough thing to hold up, and you definitely would not get away with it. If you had that same thing like an hour outside of Austin, you'd still have a lot of problems. You'd have a lot of problems, but you'd have less than if it was on the strip of downtown.
We're switching
Austin.
topics. We're treading into dangerous.
Yeah, okay.
Dangerous.
We're gonna keep it moving because we talked about this for a while. But no, I think it's interesting. All these different tours. Like I have so much empathy for a tourist because I think most tourists are never really that malicious. Like some people are assholes, but a lot of tourists are really just trying to go on vacation. So I sometimes like the gatekeeping types of things bother me, but. It just we'll move on. Let's go back to San Francisco, Boston.
Yep.
And how did you get into the travel space? When did you start traveling?
The ironic part of this whole situation is when I was a junior in college, I remember all of my friends were studying abroad. And I remember turning to one of my friends and going, wow, that's like really a travel bug going around. I just like don't think I have it. I just don't think I want to travel.
What year was this?
2015, probably.
Okay, so there really was. This was the beginning.
That being said, no, I said I didn't want to travel.
What changed your mind?
So, 2 things. One, growing up in San Francisco with a dad who, my whole dad's side of the family was in Boston. We drove across the country a lot. My dad was really into road trips. I don't know how he did it, honestly. I was probably 12 or 13, like the brattiest years of my entire life. And we drove from San Francisco to Boston and took a different route every single time.
Really?
So when I say
how long of a drive is that?
It can.
What were you just on like your DS?
No, I didn't have a Game Boy. My parents.
And you were an only child.
Yeah.
Too. Oh my
I
God.
read a lot of books.
This is why she's so smart.
Yeah, there it is.
Yeah, that'll do it. Trava.
But no, and my dad made it really fun. Like, I really, really appreciate him for that. Like, we would lay down a map and he would go, okay, what are the things that you want to see? And it would be really, really random things. Like, I really wanted to go to the Omaha Zoo because I heard they had a really great penguin exhibit. Or I wanted to go to Louisville, Kentucky because that's where the Bat Museum factory was. Really into baseball at the time. And we would sit down together and just plan every single state. Think about all the states that you're driving through. And I mean, I have driven through every single state. And when you're 12, you don't appreciate it.
But how does this... Well, yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Yes, traveling when you're young. Did you travel a lot when you were young?
Just to these states. Well, I would go home.
You didn't go anywhere internationally?
I would go home to see my mom's family, but that's different. I felt like I was doing the same thing in the U.S., just with better food.
So, no, but you've been... How many countries have you traveled to at this point?
I don't really keep count.
That's a good... Okay, don't keep count. But a lot. You've traveled a lot. You've
Probably
been around...
over 45, I'd say.
Around 45?
Over 45.
Yeah, that's crazy.
So.
Yeah, so like... And you got into it around 2015, did the backpacking stuff.
Okay, so we...
But no, I think real quick, before we do that, I want to just get to the context of like where you are right now. Do you want to explain just like rough idea of what you do?
Do you know how to explain my job?
No.
Can you try to explain my job and then I'll explain my job?
I literally could never explain
Just try.
your job.
Give it like a 2 sentence.
Financial consultant?
Yeah.
You just analyze what are good financial options for people?
No. So you're thinking of financial advisor.
What are you? Come on, help me out.
Chinese.
I have no clue.
So I work in consulting.
Nice.
So when you say financial consultant like that, a lot of people think of financial advisor. Like, I do not deal with anyone's personal finances. I do not know how to tell you what to do with your 401k. Like, that is not my job. Basically, what I do is I look at banks and wealth and asset managers, and I do strategy consulting for them. So it'll either be risk-based or strategy-based, kind of whatever the client needs, but it's all within either banking and capital markets. So think of your like JP Morgans, your Bank of Americas, or it's with wealth and asset managers. So think like BlackRock, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay. So you work, you're constantly on the road.
Yes.
You work a very good job that allows you to work remotely a lot, but you can also work in the office. You balance both of these things. Your life is pretty much on the go all the time.
So fun fact, when I first applied for this job, I did not know that it was so travel focused.
So the job itself is travel focused.
Yeah, but think about it. If you want to, I mean, that being said, I started there pre-COVID. COVID has changed everything. But if you're working for a client, like your client wants to see you there working.
Really?
Yeah.
So like if you like sign a contract with a company, you would go and work with them on the ground, boots on the ground.
Yep.
And now with Zoom, it's kind of changed, maybe a little less travel.
Yeah, the thing is with COVID, everything was remote, right? So once a company starts seeing like, oh, they can do the same work at home.
Yeah.
Why are we paying for them to go?
Yeah.
That being said, there's still a ton of relationship building, and that relationship building is in person, but it's skewed things a lot. The kind of travel I did before is not the kind of traveling happening in the consulting industry now.
Yeah, well, that's the interesting thing, right? I think you're OG at what a lot of people are doing now, because a lot of people, because of COVID, realize they can work remotely. So a lot of people who have cushy jobs that pay well are moving to or staying on the road all the time.
Yeah. A
lot of times they'll be in a relationship and they'll just go to Colombia. They'll go to Mexico City, they'll go to Tulum, like Bali. Why not? And so, but you were doing it before this was like a whole, that's what I think is so interesting is you were doing this half travel, half corporate lifestyle where you're on the road a lot of times. And now after COVID, it's kind of like a lot of people do that, right? What has that been like for you, seeing that in your industry?
I mean, I kind of love it. I think that I had a really hard time in the beginning when I started working because I was constantly on the road and I was like, I'm paying rent to be in an apartment that I'm never in.
I'm paying so...
It's
I'm
tough.
mad about my Seattle rent.
It's tough.
I just went over to Seattle for 3 days.
I mean, especially when you live in a city, you're paying so much to be there, and you're always on the road.
To not even be there.
So what's the point? So a lot of what I did when I first started working is there's something called flex travel. So if I'm being sent to New York from Boston every week, I can go home on the weekend. If I don't want to go home, I can take that ticket price, say $350, and apply it towards a ticket anywhere else.
Oh, that's nice.
So my first 6 or 7 months on the job, every weekend I was in a new city.
Every weekend.
Every weekend.
And you were flying a lot of domestic, but I think domestic U.S. travel seems like a really interesting world to me. Because although you've done a lot of international too, but I think like the domestic, like That's where like the people who are really on the rat race,
Oh yeah.
like the people who are really cycling Denver, Newark, or whatever Denver, Atlanta, you know, they're just going from like one Hilton to the next. It's
Yeah.
like, have you seen that movie?
Up in the air.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right? Isn't it kind of interesting, that
If
lifestyle?
you are a consultant, Up in the Air is your comfort movie. Like,
I mean,
that's
it
just
is
known.
kind of comforting. Like, there is nothing wrong with the life. It's a
actually
little
a really
creepy.
sad movie.
It is sad, but at the same time, it is weirdly comforting, right? Like, everything is always kind of okay in an airport.
There's a quote that George Clooney says that's something about like his comfort place, sort of like 10,000 feet or 35,000 feet in the air, like that. I feel that.
Yeah, I can understand that too. I think now too, because I never buy Wi-Fi on planes unless I really have work to do.
Okay.
So I think it's nice to be off the internet.
Isn't it mostly free on planes?
I don't know. I never
People are
use
looking for
Wi-Fi. I never buy Wi-Fi. So I kind of think it's a good detox, especially because I'm doing more of these TikToks and
Yeah.
Instagrams. I am on my phone way more now.
Oh yeah.
And but I don't exactly know what to do with. I'm thinking about getting a second phone to have TikTok. I'm worried that if I delete TikTok off of my phone, it will hurt me in the algorithm.
I wouldn't be that surprised.
I wouldn't be surprised either. So I'm thinking about getting a second phone, actually, one just for posting, because I really am on TikTok way too much.
What's your screen time?
Oh,
We're not
will
gonna
not
talk
disclose.
that.
It's like 8 hours right now.
That's a third of the day.
Oh yeah, it's insane.
Yeah.
But I don't know why it was that. No, but you know that's normal for people my age. Guys, comment in the comment section if you have above 7 hours. Comment in the comment section. It's a scary amount of people. No, like most people, or at least at 7.
Were we talking about this? I was talking about this with someone, but there is a girl who went to rehab for phone addiction, and I think
I need it.
That
Get me
is
on
going
that.
to be the future. People are
I need
talking
to
about
go
it
there
now.
ASAP, Rocky.
We're gonna start a GoFundMe.
I like can't even like go to sleep without looking at my phone for like a little bit of time. I think I'm just anxious about leaving my phone places too. But anyways, let's get back to it. I want to get back to the travel industry and your perspective. So corporate, I think it's so cool. Like when I was in Panama, I was staying at these Selena hostels, which I'm a big fan of. And they have really good Wi-Fi and they have a really good environment. And basically they're perfect for remote workers because they have a shared working space that always has fast Wi-Fi, always has printers, always has places to do meetings. So people love it. Like, it seems like such a fun lifestyle. They all wake up, they go surf, they come back, they work their job like in the stock market or whatever they're doing. And then they call it quits around like 2 p.m., 3 p.m., maybe take a call in the afternoon, and they go surf and they go drink and they have like it seems like a great life. I just wonder how long it'll last before like, because a lot of these guys too, like everyone I met was like, I'm about to quit their job. That's what they would always say. Like, I'm about to quit my job, but they were all saying it. So
yeah, I mean, there's also, and I don't really want to get into this, but there's also like quiet quitting when people still work a job but do like the bare minimum
and see how long it takes.
Yeah, there's a ton of jobs in corporate America where you could work.
Well, this is another interesting topic because I was, again, talking to the girl yesterday, and she works not in corporate America, but a normal job in America. All right, not corporate. She's like a corporate gatekeeper. All right, and basically, we were just talking about. I was like, so like, how much work do you really do? And I was like, how much work do? Because the thing is, we were talking about how YouTube laid off like 12,000 people, which I shouldn't say on the podcast because we're probably gonna get pushed down. But I don't care. And I was like, okay, so if you have a product as a company, YouTube's the product. And you can lay off 12,000 people and nothing with your product actually changes in any way. What does that tell you about like the amount of people working there and how much they're actually doing? Because I think most people in life don't work that hard in like normal America. It's just not everyone. There's exceptions, obviously, lots of exceptions, but a lot of people are not working that hard.
Yeah. I mean, you're not wrong, but the thing is like when that quantity of people gets laid off, the remainder of people are typically taking on those jobs.
Right. That's a good point because they're not doing nothing.
Yeah.
Right. And so when you get laid off all those people now, people are probably just being overworked.
Or think about like parts of products that are then pulled.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. So, I mean, it can depend. But this, I guess, is off topic anyways. I'm really good at that. Let's go back to travel.
Should rename your podcast to just Tangents. Tangents with Andrew James.
I mean, I have a tangential mind, so this is where we're at.
Or But I Digress. That must exist already, But I Digress.
But I digress. You should start it. You have a good podcasting voice. Guys, comment below. Corie Fay.
Things I don't have the time for.
Why wouldn't you? You have such an interesting perspective. You could talk about like
I don't
corporate
have the
America
time.
and travel.
So here's the thing about working in consulting. It's a very work hard, play hard environment. Like, yes, there are incredible benefits, but you're working.
For a reason.
Yeah.
For a reason.
Like there's
a trade-off.
Yeah.
Yeah, like everything. There's a paycheck for a reason. Like we were looking at, I remember when I was in Saudi, we were out on the water and there was these big ass oil rigs where people go to work for 6 months of the year.
Yeah.
But they live on these like hell machines half of their time. So technically half of the time that they're alive, they're living on this hell machine. If they did that their whole life. But the percentage of their life, that's what it is.
Commercial fishermen are the same way. Like in Alaska, they work a ton for a bit, but then they get like
that
months.
was that girl I just met. Yeah.
In here?
In Alaska. The Alaska girl.
Oh, it's like in Miami.
Alaska girl. Talk to me. Text me back, please.
Oh, man. Let it go.
I just got ghosted by a girl who lives in Alaska.
Let it go.
If you're getting ghosted by girls from Alaska, I mean...
It says a lot, honestly.
It's not looking good. Well, that leads me to my next question, actually, which is about the travel industry and, you know, romance in general. Because although you're not fully in the travel industry, but you're in two of these worlds. But I think it's got to be similar. What is the travel industry like dating pool like for you? And how does it relate to the dating pool in like corporate America? People are always on the move.
I want to expand it more than just dating because it's relationships in general. Like when and I know you know this, when you're on the road all the time, your relationships with your significant other, your friends, even your family, like it really suffers because you're just not around. And if you think about it, all those missed birthdays, engagement parties, anything else. Yeah, they add up. And people stop inviting you because they never think you're around. And because of that, it becomes this like editing process of friends, right? Like I am really lucky that I have a good group of friends that all have me on Find My Friends. And they've sort of stuck with me through this whole journey. And I'll really never forget, not even that long into knowing them, I started my job at my company and we're opening my computer and saying, hey, you're on assignment in New York. And I immediately texted our group chat and they're like, wait, there's no way they would send you to New York. Like, that's next week. And I was like, yeah, you're right. That's crazy. There's no way I can go to New York next week. And now, like, I'm expected to go to New York or another city at the drop of a hat.
Right.
But it's tough. And it's tough when you see the Instagram stories and you see them all hanging out and you know you would be there if you were physically there, but you can't be.
Yep.
And so it does come at a trade-off, but you just kind of have to hope and work on those relationships that are worth it and those relationships that can just pick right up. Because anyone that resents you for not being around for either doing something you're passionate about or doing your job, like, are they really your friend?
Yep. No, I totally agree. I think it just makes the friends that I did have before even more special.
Oh, absolutely.
Like the people that do stick around, the people who are waiting for me still, the people who are still going to hop on a phone call with me and talk to me. It's just like, oh, okay, so you guys were really the only real ones all along. And I mean, but I still want to make more friends and things like that. But it's super tough for people who are in any kind of industry where you're on the move a lot. Like making friends is a challenge. Romantic relationships are even harder. It's all difficult, but you have to still try. I think that's the main thing. I had a therapist for like 6 weeks. Shout out to Christy. She's fired. Not a fan, but she did have some good advice.
Oh, Christy.
She had some good advice. Her advice was that to just keep reaching out to people. Like in my position, I have to be the one to reach out because I'm the one who has the difficult schedule.
Yes.
So I will always have to be the one to make things happen.
Yeah,
and I'm okay with that for now. Like because I can see why it would be exhausting to ask me to do things when the answer is usually going to be no, not because of anything personal, but because things are happening. And the freelance life, for me, it's freelance because like, I take jobs when they come, basically. Like, I got a job, and it is due at the end of the month. I have a video, and I just got the agreement today, like an hour ago. So, I got the agreement, and now my whole life has to change around this video for the rest of the month. And I found out about it 2 days ago.
No, you're absolutely right. And that's when I am home, I do try to make an effort to, like, bring everyone together. And that does make a huge difference. And that's kind of in any friendship, though. Like, you can't be the one always showing up to stuff. Like, you've got to plan something.
I think I used to be shy as far as, like, what sounds fun to do.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't voice it. But now it's like, well, they're not voicing it, so I may as well. It's not a bad... Say, like, I want to go see a movie. Maybe I'd be the one to not even suggest it. But now I'm like, well, I'm going to see this movie. Does anyone want to come?
Exactly.
If you don't come, I'm still going to see a great movie. So I think there's just benefit to this power in planning and not worrying about whether or not people are going to come.
And I think people talk about the downside of travel and relationships a lot, but there's also a huge upside. Like, you
100%.
have the opportunity to make friends with people all over the world. And that widens your global perspective so much and benefits you as a person in ways that really nothing else can.
Well, for me, it's like the proof is in the concept. Like the reason I choose to live my life like this is because I do think in the end it's better for me. Like it's a trade-off. That's what we're saying. It's not perfect. It is a trade-off. I think for me and a lot of people, it is worth the trade-off because I get to meet so many interesting people. like really, like everybody I meet is pretty much always blows my mind, and I'm always like, I would never have met someone like you if I'd stayed in Virginia. Like the way the experiences, the spectrum of experiences across humans that you meet when you're traveling is extreme. It's broad. People have wild life experiences, and the more you, especially when you're younger, but throughout your life, the more you can talk to people and just experience new people, I think is invaluable and just inspiring. And yeah, I think it's worth it for me for sure. Now, I think there's they are shallow sometimes. I've learned not to trust people. So
They're just life experiences.
Little life experience for me.
This is not a travel thing. This is a life thing.
Just because someone's interesting and someone seems to have a good moral compass and like a good way of being does not mean that they're really your friend. Like, do understand that. These people that when I'm on a trip, I used to think, oh, we're best friends now. I did. When I was 17, I would be like, we're not, but then I realized, no, because they're going to be on a trip next week with a new person.
You're also 17.
And I'm going to be on a person. No, but I just know that it's not what you think it's going to be, and that's okay. Let it be what it is.
That's just called managing expectations.
Manage expectations. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I had to learn how to do that.
Yeah, but everyone learns how to do that. You just had the opportunity to learn it while traveling.
Look, this podcast is about being relatable.
Yeah, okay,
so there's people out there who are also learning about managing expectations. Not everyone was reading while their dad drove across the country to Boston. I was personally playing Nintendo, and you can see where that got me.
A funny story about that is actually there's some duds, I will say, driving across the country too.
There's
some duds.
Okay.
Yellowstone National Park.
Sucks.
The Old Faithful. I have never been more disappointed in something in my entire life.
What are you talking about? Yellowstone's amazing.
If you waited 90 minutes to see Old Faithful when you were 11 years old.
90 minutes is bad timing.
Yeah, I just missed it.
90 minutes is just unfortunate, but I went there and it was sick. Bison and it's a volcano.
Yeah, but you also had like the plane over the...
No. Nope. On the ground.
But Chris
Boots on the ground.
Did Chris just go by himself?
Maybe. I didn't go on a plane.
Oh.
Anyways, so Yellowstone is not as... Okay, where is a place that you've been that you do... Like, where's your favorite place you've ever been?
No.
Top tropical destination you've ever been?
If you meet someone who's traveled a ton, you cannot ask them what their favorite place is.
I know, but I'm still going to ask. Top tropical.
Tropical?
No. Here's what I'm going to ask you. Okay. Tomorrow.
Yes.
No, in an hour, you leave for a flight.
Boston.
No. Can't be in the U.S. and it can't be anywhere you just were. But it has to be someone you've been before. Where are you going?
Probably London.
London?
Yeah.
Yeah, you seem like you like London.
I love London.
What is it about? I don't love London. I like it, but it wasn't particularly special to me.
So I also think that I have a special affinity to it because I have a ton of friends that live there. So and I've been there enough that it feels like a third, fourth home.
Yeah, okay. Because you're familiar with the surroundings.
Correct.
You know, you're never confused where you're at. You know how to travel. You know the working. I feel that way when I'm in New York.
It's a vibe.
I don't live in New York, but because I'm comfortable when I'm in New York. It's not, there's no unknown factors. I know how to get off get from the airport to the hotel.
Yeah, but you also lived there, so it's a little different.
Yeah. All right, Morocco. I feel that way in Morocco.
Okay, yeah, perfect.
Morocco, because I've been to Casablanca a lot. When I get to my hotel in Casablanca and I know exactly where like my favorite restaurants are and I know where my coffee shop is, I feel very comfortable. I love staying in Casablanca now and just editing, which is kind of ironic.
That is ironic.
But I'll only stay in one district and I'll go within like 6 blocks of that one spot.
That's the thing. It's travel, but so you still get that excitement of being somewhere new, but it's also comfortable because you have your favorite.
I love comfortable travel. Like this is what I did in Egypt. This is why I didn't go everywhere around.
Yeah.
I just stayed in Cairo, Egypt for a week. I made friends. And it was sick. Like, it was so much more relaxing and I was more productive and I was more happy than if I was running around every single day trying to...
Stressful.
It's just about learning. I think I'm huge on learning how you best function. And just because someone operates at a higher level in a different way doesn't mean that works for you. You have to know yourself personally. But how do you operate best? Are you like a baby steps kind of person or are you like jump in?
With my close friends, we have kind of the jokes of like the laws. I think it's the laws of... Newton's laws of motion or laws of thermodynamics. An object that is in motion stays in motion. An object at rest stays at rest. And that is the best way to describe me. I am either moving at 100 miles per hour or I'm not moving at all. Yeah, I am too. Yeah. So, but that's kind of the thing because of that. And I have this sort of need to see everything and do everything that I'm known to just kind of like cram a lot in.
Like, what about FOMO? So you just went to Coachella.
Yes.
You got to see one of the greatest performances. I'm so jealous. She got to see the Fred Again set with Skrillex and what's the other DJ?
It was Fortet, Skrillex, and Fred Again.
I was so jealous. I'd never had such FOMO in my life, guys. I was just like, so mad.
I've been to a lot of shows that blew me away. I mean, so they call themselves Pangborn House Mafia, and they did a couple shows in New York that I was in Japan for, and I was so upset that I missed it. And although I did really want to see Frank Ocean before I knew what Frank Ocean was going to be, I was pretty disappointed that we were getting another weekend of him. So when I found out, when they pulled them and then announced TBA, we all had this moment like, oh my God, TBA. The amount that I was stalking their Instagram stories, being like, I think that looks like the main stage at Coachella. And it was. And it was unbelievable.
Yeah, I can't even imagine. But for you, FOMO is crazy too. So say you weren't at Coachella, everyone was there. What are you thinking about? I'm saying I think you have a bit of like you said, like you always want to stay moving. You always want to be in the mix a little bit.
Yeah, but I don't think I necessarily have FOMO because everything's a trade-off, right?
Yeah.
There's an importance, and I think this is also part of growing up, is you see the value in everything. And okay, I'm not at Coachella, let's say I'm at home, but I'm probably doing something else at home, or I'm taking the time to rest or recharge so that I can do something else.
Yeah. I want to talk to you about solo traveling as well, because you're
okay.
someone who I think can speak to it more. I tried to talk about this in my last podcast, but I couldn't. But women like to solo travel a lot right now. It's like a big trend.
Yeah.
What do you think? What do you think is because even more so than men? Like when I like solo traveling as well, but when I look at content online, it's almost all female. Any kind of solo travel. There are some men, of course, but it's a lot of females. So what do you think is behind that? Why are girls traveling so much by themselves?
You're sick of men.
Yeah, I guess so. Right?
That's pretty much what it is.
So.
I think there's two parts to it. I think for a very, very long time, women couldn't solo travel. I mean, if you think about, so my dad was a big traveler as well. Like he basically hitchhiked all around Europe, and he was saying it's really hard to find a girl by herself because it's just not safe. So there's this one element, granted there's always going to be like human trafficking concerns, things like that, but it's much safer now, and it's kind of an empowerment thing. You're taught your whole life that if you're a girl, like you shouldn't really be doing things on your own, like you're always there to like support someone else, or like, but to go and travel on your own, I think everyone should solo travel at least once, whether it's a small local trip or a bigger one. It is such an introspective experience, and you learn so much about yourself. And as you get older, if you're not a freelance travel videographer, the people that you travel with have to fall into a very specific niche of people who have similar time off, people who have similar interest in places, people who have similar budgets, and people who have similar interests in terms of not just location, but like activities.
Yes. Yeah, well, okay, that's a great example because that's why I solo travel, right? Because I do it because, again, I don't like to plan, so it's hard for me to make plans with people, but I'm also very sporadic, so I do book trips like that, and I'm pretty sure it'll work out. Like, that's kind of my mentality, and I also am very much like, I think it's a control thing. I do. If I'm being honest with myself, I like being able to go, I'm flying here on this day, and I know that works for me. I don't even have to check with anyone else.
Yeah.
I get very bogged down with the details. So I think it's a freedom thing. But it's really interesting. Like, I think it is. You're probably right. Girls are traveling now because it's something that you really couldn't do as much in the past.
Yeah. And we have the ability to do it now. And it's so empowering. Like, I truly, if you have the chance to do it because even if you hate it, like you learn so much about yourself.
That's what I'm saying. It can still be I've had bad solo trips.
Oh, yeah.
You know, like I do think you should be aware that that's a possibility. It's not necessarily going to be great, but you always learn something from it, no matter what. And I've definitely, like, you can mess it up. I was talking in my last podcast about it. Like, I've gone to cities before last year when I was burnt out traveling, and I just kind of like laid around like most of the, like I didn't do anything, but it was still fine, and it was still an interesting experience for me. So yeah, definitely solo travel. But I do also say what I have had to learn is I still prefer not solo traveling.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to be better about making plans and trying to travel with people because I do think it is inherently more fun to be with people.
But that's the thing, the thing that I really want to stress is that like a lot of people solo travel because they don't want to wait to travel to find the right people to travel with. Like you are really lucky that you have people who have similar interests, similar schedules, can do the things that you want to do. But a lot of people, like,
they don't.
They're waiting for a significant other, they're waiting for their friend, or they're waiting to find that person. Don't wait around forever. It's
tough because I have a best friend who works a normal job, 9 to 5, doesn't travel. So like we try to plan one trip a year, and it's tough.
Yeah.
You know, just to find 1 week where we can really make it work, just because of the way it is. So it is true. I do need to, understand that it's nice to be able to just travel with people randomly. Let me ask you one more question. It'll take one more minute, and then we can. So you've been traveling a lot.
Yes.
You're very good with points.
Yeah.
She's a big points girl.
Love the points.
I only got it. I think at one point you yelled at me actually because I didn't have even.
Oh my God, he was paying with a debit card.
No, but I didn't even have a
account,
like a frequent flyer number.
Oh
and then
my
you
God.
called me through Chris, and you were like, Andrew,
Oh, I do think
get
about
a
this.
frequent flyer number. And I was like, I don't think I need it. It's okay.
If you are traveling, it doesn't matter if you're a frequent traveler. It doesn't matter if you're an infrequent traveler, frequent traveler. Get those miles for everything. It's free to sign up.
It's free money.
Every airline, every hotel chain pretty much has one. You collect the points, even if it's slowly.
Yeah, you're still collecting it.
If you have kids, sign your kids up. My parents did that for me. Like, I've been a Sky Miles member since 96 or something. But those points will accumulate to something that they can use when they're older.
The misconception, and someone just asked me about this the other day, is that to sign up for these accounts, you need a credit card. Mm-hmm. No, it's just like signing up for an email. It's like it's signing up for anything. It's just like signing up for Walmart rewards. It's not a credit card. Now, credit cards can be helpful, and those can come later on. But just sign up and get your number, your frequent flyer number, and enter it in. I try to fly just with United, which is Star Alliance. Mm-hmm. But even when I fly, I just booked a flight with Cathay Pacific, which is One World, which is American Airlines. I still put in my American Airlines number because it's still free points, and eventually it will add up to something, so you may as well put it in, And
on top of that, it's not just if you're flying or traveling a lot. So Delta, for example, has a partnership with Starbucks. So when you buy your Starbucks coffee, that money can go towards your Delta account. Mm-hmm. Same thing with like Uber and Lyft. They both have, I think one of them has like a Marriott partnership. You can get miles through doing normal things. Also, shopping portals are huge. Every American Airlines, United, Delta, a couple of others have shopping portals where it's just a Chrome extension.
Yep. And
you'll sign on to, I don't know, what's a website that you buy things off a lot?
Amazon.
Okay, maybe not Amazon. Think like Nordstrom. If you want to buy something off of Nordstrom, you go to Nordstrom.com. It'll pop up. It'll say, or REI. REI is another example. Backcountry is actually a huge one. It'll come up and say, hey, we're doing 10 miles for every $1.
Yeah.
That's a great way to get miles. And they all add up.
They all add up. Like, I do Lyft now because Lyft gives me more points with my credit card.
Exactly.
Things like that. It's like a little game, and it's fun. But it actually pays off more than you'd think, because even my credit card, the credit card I have now is the Reserve, the Sapphire Reserve.
Yep, love the
But
Reserve.
I've only had it for maybe 8 months, and I already booked like my ticket to Namibia, South Africa, which is an expensive ticket. I got basically completely covered just off of my credit card points. And
we can have a whole nother episode on that.
Yeah, guys, we'll do another episode about that. Corie actually has to catch a flight out of here, but thank you so much for being on the podcast. I think this went well.
This was great.
Guys, comment below if you want her to start a podcast about the struggles of
comment
growing
if you
up
want
as an
me
Asian
back.
American
How's
in
that?
San Francisco.
We'll start with that.
I absolutely think you'll be back on the show. Guys, thank you for listening. This has been GlobeFocus episode 3. Thank you for watching. I'll see you guys in the next one.